Hey, my name is Sruti. I'm an author and spiritual teacher, and I write and talk about my experience of spiritual awakening and chronic pain. In 2018, I had an allergic reaction to an ear piercing that radically altered my appearance and my life. The condition, which is rare, is called erythromelalgia and feels like you have a hot frying pan stuck to your ear and face. I was also on prednisone for 6 years, which radically altered my appearance for the duration of the illness. Most doctors didn't think I would recover, but that is why I'm sharing what I have to share, because it helped me get through it, and it can help you get through your problems too. Hope you enjoy. Today, I'd like to pay tribute to a young woman named Mikayla Rains. Mikayla Rains passed away recently at the young age of 30. She was a YouTuber with millions of followers, and she was the founder of an organization called Save a Fox that saves foxes from fur factories. Mikayla was so young that when I first saw the news, I wondered why a young woman would have passed away. Maybe it was cancer or some other illness. But as I saw more and more stories flooding my news feed, I realized she committed suicide. And the reason she committed suicide was because of online bullying and harassment from her YouTube and online presence. This was something that her husband made a point of saying after her passing. So I don't know Mikayla Rains. I don't know much about her or the situation except what I just said. But she kept flooding my consciousness and my news, and it felt like there was a deeper reason for this. So I spent some time meditating with her and realized that I was 30 years old when I experienced some intense online harassment and bullying because of my decision to share my story on YouTube and social media and to do interviews and speak publicly. And I received hate mail. I also received wonderful emails from people who had really connected with my work, but I received some surprising hate mail from not just from, any old person, or not from young people who don't know any better. This was hate mail from people who were older than me, supposedly in a spiritual community, and really should have known better. Just was really sort of unnecessary and inappropriate to reach out to someone and say those kind of things. I also received inappropriate comments on Facebook and YouTube, really from people who just stopped by in passing, didn't bother to connect with me or my story, and passed some kind of cruel judgment on the situation, or even just on me personally. At the end, for Mikayla, her husband said one of the hardest things was she was being bullied by people she knew, who she considered friends and family. And I also experienced that. And that was definitely the hardest part. Is, you can take a certain level of inappropriate hate from a stranger, but when your friends and family don't even have your back and are, in fact, contributing to the bullying, just the sense of isolation, I think people attempted to shame me, which didn't really work because I never felt shame. Mostly what I felt was just sadness that people would behave that way, because I know I would not behave that way to another person, no matter, really no matter the situation. I just don't find it appropriate. So, I mean, technically I survived my experience of bullying, but it did leave scars. And in some ways I didn't survive. So I obviously survived, meaning I did not commit suicide. But the mental and emotional breakdown I had coincided with some pretty serious health problems. So some of the bullying, which I assume is the same for Mikayla, was because of just simply being a young woman, just my appearance. I guess the idea that just by putting yourself online, you've allowed yourself to become an object of hate or an object at all. And it's much easier to attack an object than it is to attack a human being. So the way that I got sick was I had this allergic reaction to the ear piercing and my face blew up and it looked like I'd aged 20 years. So I actually I was no longer a young woman. For 6 or 7 years, my appearance was not a young woman. So part of that was sad because, your 30s, especially your young 30s, are kind of the prime of your life. And to spend 7 years of that not as a young woman and in horrible pain is regretful. But in other ways, because of the situation and the fact that leading up to that moment, I had the allergic reaction when I was 30, right at the most intense moment of being bullied. It was actually very freeing because I was in so much pain that I had no choice but to stop sharing online. So it was pretty easy to just shut everything down. Like there was no way, it was hard to even lift my head out of bed. I was just laying there with ice on my face and a fan and going to doctor's appointments. And so there was no time or energy or interests in continuing on with my work at that time. So that was serendipitous. Also, I really got tired of being attacked just for having the appearance of being a young woman. Young men don't get attacked this way. So young men who are in the prime of their life are uplifted and respected, but young women, with all the markers of health, beauty, intelligence, it's exactly the opposite. And there's this Cinderella effect where everyone jumps in to rip Cinderella's dress off. So, so I didn't mind in some ways because I had this enormous mental, emotional breakdown, becoming an old woman, because it freed me from being attacked by society. So I could actually interact with people. I became unrecognizable, so I basically died. I didn't exist as myself for 7 years in the way people had known me. In some ways, will never exist that way again, just of what I went through. And but my appearance didn't look at all like I was. So I was invisible to the people who would have known me, and the people who didn't know me just treated me like I was an older woman. So, and they were much nicer to me. Especially women were much nicer to me, which is too bad. It made me happy. that was like one of the one joys of that situation, besides being in actual horrible pain, is just how nice people were all of a sudden. Like, for no other reason than my appearance had changed and I was no longer a young, attractive woman. So if you ever think that young women like have it easy or the pretty privilege nonsense, it's kind of the opposite. I mean, people are really nasty to young, attractive women for no reason. And super nice when you are an old woman with a puffy face. So, yeah, there's a whole slew of insights I could dive into, but I just want to talk about kind of this experience of the bullying and the aftermath. So because I was bullied so much and then became so different, I was set free from that really foul, inappropriate, disgusting behavior. And it did. So I didn't know if I was going to come back and share, because it was, I mean, the whole thing was just traumatic. I mean, like, my mom was trying to comfort me while I was crying and trying to tell her how bad the behavior had gotten towards me at the end. And she could see how painful it was, but she wasn't in my shoes. And all she knew was that, you know, her daughter was being attacked and she didn't want that anymore. So she actually doesn't know I'm doing this work right now. My family pretty much doesn't want me back on here, just for my own protection. But part of what happened in those 7 years is I just had all that time to sit with all of the spiritual and feminist insights that I talk about here. And they just, instead of kind of going away or me forgetting about it, all I can see is these dynamics play out in like every situation I'm in society. So it sort of is necessary. It's just like it's almost like it would dishonor the path I was on to not share. So part of this sharing is the bullying. And I actually, because I went through what I went through and because of what happened to my appearance and my face, it is less likely that people will bully me for no reason. It's not impossible, though. People really need to understand the dynamics behind this, which I will touch on in a minute. But what happened to Mikayla is sort of like, I could see why she was flooding my consciousness, because she sort of was up against things she probably didn't see clearly the way I was gifted to see clearly. And it's really not her fault what the decision she made. I could understand the level of pain she was in. Like I feel like I'm sitting in her shoes. So when I connected in with her energy psychically, one phrase that repeatedly comes through from her, for me, is the phrase, fight for me. And so that's kind of why I'm making this video sort of about her and sort of about me, is she wanted me to bring her situation to light. I'm not going to sit here and like channel personal information for her family. But by the way, my deepest condolences are with her family in this difficult time, especially her husband and her daughter. Having said that, I also want to make a point of saying that people who commit suicide are not diminished, punished, or sent to hell or purgatory in any kind of way. Suicide is kind of a fail-safe emergency eject button that's like built into our soul contracts when we come to Earth. Like if we made a decision to come to Earth to have this experience as a human being, like as a soul, we have contracts to come and live a certain storyline as a certain person in a certain lifetime. But, we have free will. We have a guidelines, but we have, things can be altered based on what kind of decisions we make when we get down here. And sometimes things are more difficult than we realized when we had signed up for it. So if we came down here and there was no fail safe, that would actually be a very cruel experiment, because things are very difficult down here. So I've always viewed suicide that way. I know that there are situations and there are a lot of people who associate suicide with low self-esteem and hating yourself. It's also is a way out. And it's not the preferred way out. The preferred way out is to live your life until its natural end. And life will always give you support even in your darkest times. And that's a lot of what I talk about in my work, is finding the source of your own being in your darkest hour, so that you don't end up pushing that type of fail-safe button. But having sat in her shoes, I can understand why she would have made a decision like that. And it's really too bad. I mean, that always suicide gets pushed onto the person who made the decision. But I am going to make a case for why actually it was society that pushed her there and kind of blocked off all of her exits. And it in a really cruel way that really didn't have to happen, and ultimately society ended up wasting her life. It's the patterns of society. So instead of, the bullying does need to stop. Just individual people bullying other people needs to stop. If you're online and you have the urge to say something cruel and unnecessary to someone for no reason, like, think twice before you do that. You think you're hiding behind a screen, but there's another person on the other side of that screen that you're ultimately connecting with, even if you don't know them. And that person has feelings. Doesn't matter how many followers that person has, how famous they are, still a person. Celebrities are people too. And the ones who receive the worst hate are women, especially young women. So what I found, and the reason for that, is the work I do and the work that Mikayla did is difficult, somewhat painful work. I mean, you're dealing with very intense emotions. In my case, I'm actually dealing literally with pain. That's like all I talk about, is find spiritual awakening in pain. And in Mikayla's case, she's dealing with the issue of fur and animal cruelty, and there's a lot of controversy around that and a lot of painful, intense emotions. And she also happens to be a young woman like I am. And what the toxic pattern of society that Mikayla got caught up in, that I got caught up in, is that young women are actually the prime targets of blame when society experiences pain or difficulty. So you kind of have a loaded situation when you have a young woman who is doing work in the public eye that is quite, is around some very painful issues. Is the side effect is a lot of that pain gets blamed back on her. So this is a pattern that's been going on since the myth of Adam and Eve. And whether or not you are part of this religion or not, this is a widespread earthwide myth of men and women and God. And so basically the pattern behind this myth is Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden. Eve allegedly eats from the tree of knowledge because a snake tempts her. And Adam and Eve are kicked out of the Garden of Eden, where they then experience pain, death, all the bad, dark things that life contains. And so basically all of the negative things we experience in life are blamed on Eve. Like, Eve, this is your fault that we have to experience all this. So, and Eve is obviously a young woman and Adam's sexual partner. So this is problematic, not just obviously because it sets up this really direct connection of like, let's all blame women for problems. It makes Eve into an object. I mean, when you place blame on someone, you have to make them into an object to put that blame upon them, an object of blame. That is what a scapegoat is. And we live in scapegoat society. So the pattern of oppression on the planet Earth is what happened to Eve. If you want to make someone less than you blame them for something that goes wrong, objectify them, and then they become lower than you on a hierarchy of objects, rather than seeing them for their spirit and their soul as an equal, living, breathing, feeling human being. The best way to see someone as a living, breathing human being is to recognize their spirit. And I've found the best way to recognize your own spirit and the spirit of others is actually in moments of pain, ironically. So what the tools that Adam didn't have are the tools that I learned from all of my time in having all this chronic illness and all this pain. I had a moment of horrible pain where I was rolling around on the floor. It was so painful that I couldn't think. All my thoughts vanished. I couldn't feel anything. There was no fear. Just all there was pain. And I even lost control of my body. I didn't have control over writhing on the floor. It was just kind of an automatic reaction to being in pain. And then I started to lose consciousness. And when everything was taken away from me, all of those false layers, I was and am still here as conscious presence to see all of those things vanish and be taken away from me. So what does that make the truest core part of me? And the truest, most baseline part of me does not have a form, does not have any characteristic you can describe, but is simply the point from which you see from. You don't ever look at who you truly are as an object the way we look at someone's face. You always look from consciousness. You even see the edges of eyesight and the ends of consciousness. You are aware when you are unconscious and then conscious. You are the one who sees those gaps in time. You actually don't move through time. You are always still, timeless, formless, outside of time, watching each moment of time pass in front of you like a projector or a movie. And from that point, that purest part of yourself, who you truly are, is your most powerful place of manifestation, your most purest place of peace. You don't actually experience pain there. Your body experiences pain. You don't. You are aware of that experience that you are having that will come and go. But you yourself, the purest part of yourself, never come and go. So this most pure part of yourself, your spirit, you don't have a gender. You're not necessarily a human. You don't have a body. You are formless, conscious, seeing awareness. And this is always available to you in every moment. All you have to do is remain who you are behind all of the layers that are stacked in front of you. And as all of the layers change and move, and you are moving as a human being, there's always a part of you that is completely still, watching all of this happen. And this part of yourself is the purest form of consciousness. If Adam had been taught this, that pain actually shows you the purest part of your spirit, he would not have blamed Eve for all of the painful things that appear in the world that really have nothing to do with Eve. They just exist. He would not blame anyone else for pain he experiences, and would instead use it to look inside of himself, and also as a guide, because pain is also not meant to be some like a constant state of our reality. It's a signpost that shows us that we need to change something. So what I experienced in my work with the bullying, and what Mikayla likely experienced, is that same toxic pattern of pain not being blamed onto her husband or any of the men around her, but in fact being blamed back on her simply because she's a young woman, and young women are automatically objectified. And often objectified not just because of blame, but because of appearance and sexuality. And our current patriarchal society sees women only as objects of beauty and desire that are either more or less beautiful, better or worse, higher or lower. And so we get this like Cinderella syndrome that I hinted at earlier, where the women who are perceived as being higher on that totem pole, pretty privilege, are actually treated worse because of jealousy, because some women are ranked as better than others. And this causes, because it's not true. I mean, we're not objects. We're not even fully the gender we believe we are. The gender belongs to our bodies. So because we are all equal in spirit, and we can sense this on a deep level, there is a natural jealousy that occurs from watching society rank some women as better than others. And unfortunately, again, instead of being blamed on the toxic pattern that I'm highlighting, it gets just blamed back on that woman again. So women are just like heaped with all kinds of pain and blame, and it just gets to be too much. It's not fair. This woman, Mikayla, was backed into a corner that she likely didn't see the same way I'm describing to you. And so probably couldn't differentiate that level of hate between what people were projecting onto her and what was really her. And the goal of all of that hate is to get that young woman to believe it's her fault. All of those negative things are something about her. And then, yeah, you might experience low self-esteem to the point of wanting to harm yourself or to end your life. So that is what I believe happened to Mikayla. That is why I believe she flooded my consciousness to have me make a video like this. And that is what I believe what she meant when she sent me the phrase, "fight for me." So that is my version of fighting for her, is to put out my experience of bullying, how it's deeply ingrained into our society, and how young women like myself actually experience the most intense effects of it, especially if you're a woman on social media or in the public eye, where through this medium, we're automatically objectified, flattened on behind this screen. So it is hard for me to talk about it fully, except that I do kind of have some like remaining PTSD. Like I watch young men who are my age, who are influencers, sort of easily gain traction and followers for doing a lot less work than I've done, and with a lot less hate, with the actual admiration. People just flood their Facebook and their Instagram with admiration, and they're handsome, well-spoken, attractive people. And then when there are bad comments, or I don't have as many views, or whatever negative effects sort of occur around my work, all that gets blamed back on me. And then, like maybe there's something I'm doing that's not enough, but really has nothing to do with me, which I was lucky enough to learn from this horrible bullying experience. I have PTSD from watching, again, other young men my age have their books published and just get really popular. Like Buddha walks into a bar. I remember accidentally walking into one of his early book readings at a Buddhist temple. It's like Valentine's Day. I didn't even want to be there. I hate Valentine's Day. Come on. That's why I went to the temple, people. But it was a special because it was Valentine's Day, and it happened to be this guy before he was well known. Buddha walks into a bar, and he spoke pretty authentically in front of a group of people. And again, the room just loved him. And he didn't have to deal with people yelling at him. No one stood up and told him he was broken to his face. No one questioned his spiritual insights. No one ripped the microphone out of his hand. I'm saying all this because all these things happened to me. People actually did rip the microphone out of my hands. People did publicly project onto me things that didn't exist. People did question any and all of my wisdom and insights. And people intentionally destroyed my book deals with publishers that I was working with. So it's hard to know that the pattern behind it's hard to know that people like don't recognize that it's the pattern that's at fault here. And so it did change what I talk about, how I talk about it, why I'm on here. I still have all of the insights from when I was young. I mean, I had these insights in my early 20s. I just want to make that clear because people want to rip away all of the hard-earned wisdom I had at such a young age for no other reason than the fact that I was a young woman. And I just want to make it clear that none of that has changed from then to now, except that I was bullied more. I had to go through more suffering to prove to people that what I already knew was what I knew was true. It's what kind of word can I say for this? It's a catastrophe. It's catastrophically, inappropriately bad. Especially if you're wise enough to see the pattern playing out that I just described. It becomes very clear that this young woman's death isn't just the result of some online bullying. It is a society-wide injustice. And if you're wondering why there aren't more young women who are standing up talking about their hard-earned spiritual insights, it's not because they don't have them. It's because of how hard it is and how much hate is leveled at you. I mean, even if you didn't talk about intense topics like pain and enlightenment, whatever, you're going to have hate leveled at you for nothing other than your appearance. So, yeah, some of the PTSD effects that I deal with now are, I did make the decision that it was important to come back no matter what happened, but I have to have some distance from the social media. So I for a while had comments off, but I turned them back on and now don't read them and make a point of not even looking at them. So it's so sad for people who would have a good, like a constructive comment or would genuinely want to connect or who wants to find a way to express something, vulnerable. But for my own mental health reasons, I cannot connect with any, it's like the bad, the rotten apples spoiled the bunch. And at this time, the only way to keep the messages authentic and to keep posting things is to be blind to the comments. So I do cover my eyes to not see comments. I also had to really restrict how people could contact me at all. I didn't want to have a way for people to contact me, but it was a little bit unrealistic. So there are ways. They're just very difficult. And again, that's kind of sad because I used to be able to connect more freely with people who were suffering and who really did actually benefit from working with me. And I do hope I'll be able to do that again when I'm guided to. But again, for my mental health and physical health, I had to come off. I'm not on a lot of social media. There's just too much inappropriate contact. So I guess the other thing Mikayla wanted me to say, the phrase that came through from her as well was, don't let the sun go down on tomorrow before the sun rises today. And I was not familiar with that. I just heard it. I guess it's from maybe a Cher song. It's definitely a lyric to a song. But obviously, the deeper meaning behind that is, make the most of your life and live in the now. So that's the most personal thing I'll be channeling from Mikayla. Except that to say she's totally okay. Nothing. She's not unloved. She's not harmed. She is totally whole in spirit. She is not suffering. She is surrounded by angels and spirit guides and ancestors, and her work continues on through her organization. And I think that her passing is a warning sign for society about who we risk harming with this kind of toxic behavior. So what really needs to happen at the end of the day is we need to really alter our relationship to how we deal with pain in society. And by altering our relationship to pain and to how we view our spiritual process, how we can use pain to deepen our presence and our practice rather than blame ourselves or others, that is the key to unwinding all of this toxic jealousy and abuse and hierarchy and patriarchy and the ones who were damaged the most by patriarchy, which are those at the very bottom. And those at the very bottom of the hierarchy and patriarchy are always little girls and young women who grow up and become older women. And so I do also want to say that, just because I get older doesn't mean I ever forget how I was treated when I was younger. So the next time you treat a young woman like, how you think a young woman deserves to be treated, so poorly, the next time you treat a young woman poorly, think about how when she grows up, she will always carry that. So we think maybe we're trying to save young women from being damaged, but actually we're saving all women from being damaged. Young women are going to become old women. And no matter how old I get, I will always remember every single moment where I was treated like crap for no other reason than I was young and female. I will never forget. I may have forgiven those situations and forgiven those people, but I will never forget what those people did. And I will absolutely never interact with those people unless I'm absolutely forced to. And even at that, it's not going to be a pleasant interaction. So if I think about if I don't have kids, I don't know if I can have kids. I have serious health problems. But if I did have a young girl, I would be so mindful of how we are raising our children, especially our little girls, to no matter how young they are and how silly they act sometimes, or if you don't agree with something they're doing or you don't understand them, really think about the fact that you're not just dealing with a young woman in front of you, you're dealing with a person who will become a woman at all stages of her life. And the way you treat her today is going to reverberate throughout all of her tomorrows. So I guess that's my take on Mikayla's phrase, don't let the sun go down on today without before the sun rises on tomorrow. Like today, right now, is the time to alter our behavior. And even just one person that this reaches and it changes is the beginning of a ripple effect that will then transform an entire pattern across society. It really comes down to each of us to, even if we're not perfect, just become aware that this is a toxic pattern in the human consciousness and do the best we possibly can to change it now, today. Thank you.